I want to invite my esteemed panelists. First of all, we have Sarina Panahide, Kurdish-Iranian activist and artist. Welcome. All the way from Zambia, we have Joan Chirwa, who is a journalist and also the founder of the Zambia Free Press Initiative. Welcome to the Global Media Forum. And completing our panel, I'm looking for my third panelist, that is the head of travel security at CW, Gunnar Rechenburg, wherever you are. Welcome to the stage, Gunnar. Yes, please. All right, and we will also try to make sure that we leave some minutes towards the end of the discussion for you to ask your questions to the panelists as well. Sarina, my first question to you. We saw you and your very powerful performance. In your own words, what was the message that you wanted to convey?
Thank you. I think the message is clearly how I struggle just to be there. It's how we are in Iran and also in Kurdistan as a woman. I think it's important that you see the ugly different layers that you see on me, that we actually have this pressure from everywhere, and just being a woman is by itself a crime in such areas. And I think the whole performance is about how we have this struggle from inside, from being a woman, and from how we are presented outside in the society. And the struggle is very real because I put this rope around 15 minutes earlier, and it's really tight. It's experimental, but I'm already under pressure. My face is like this because that's exactly how I feel from everyday life, how I felt from everyday life being in Iran. And I think one more thing is also using some elements as a sign, like rope, because Iran is one of the countries that has the highest numbers of executions every year in the world. And from Hango Human Rights Organization, based on their data, 8.2% of all these executions in the world are Kurds. And I think it was something that, for me, it's important to bring something to show from my own struggle as a Kurdish woman first, and then as a woman in Iran. And, but we will get born again and again and again. So yes, that's not going to finish where they wanted to finish.
All right, let's stay with that first. So you used to work as an artist, as a performer in Tehran, in the capital, in Kurdish Iran. At what point did you feel like I am no longer safe in my home country?
Well, I think something that it's missing here is I used to live in Kurdistan of Iraq, and I used to live in Hawler, Erbil, from 2019, but I was regularly in Iran and Iraq, both countries. But there was a moment that the revolution movement from Women Life Freedom happened, and I felt very bad that I'm not able to do an action because I was working somewhere international, and most of my colleagues were from different countries, and to be honest, they really did not care what's happening. So just seeing them, life is going on very normally.
Well, the mass protests were happening.
Exactly, was bothering me because of work, I couldn't go back to Iran. But I needed to do something, and that's when I published the first dance video that was recorded before, but with the protest song. I did not publish it because I was scared before. But there was a moment I was like, when 15-year-old girl is fighting on the streets and getting killed directly, shoot it here, and it's dying on the streets, why am I afraid to just publish a dance video? Why? Because I want to see my mom again. And yeah, I think that's where everything turned out for me. And I started making videos targeting religion, that the government is using it as an excuse, and bring it into women's body and show my message without talking, because I think it's just easier to approach more audience and raise awareness in an easier way if you dance or show video arts. So, but if
Did
I
you
want to
receive
say
any
exactly
threats?
when, it was in November 2022 that I felt like the threat started. I cannot give you so much details, I'm sorry, because of safety reason of my family. But the threat started in Iran to my family, directly to me. And also I had also threats back to Iraq because there was 6,000 comments under one interview that I did with one of the channels in Kurdistan. All was threats and hates. Like one of them was saying, I'm gonna, wherever I see you, I will just shoot into your face because you're a danger for our society. And I think this was coming also from a religious part of the society, because we also have very wise, acknowledged, educated people in Kurdistan. So I don't want to say all, but I had the pressure from both sides. And there was a night I had a performance when I was coming back, I felt like somebody is behind me, and there was that moment that in the morning I was like, I can't, I have to find a solution. And that's where one of the NGOs helped me in Germany to come out and be in Berlin since 23rd of February 2023.
All right, Joan, I want to bring you into the conversation. You used to work for a very renowned newspaper in Zambia, The Post. That newspaper no longer exists. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, thank you so much. The Post was closed in 2016 by the government over a tax dispute, which clearly was political. I think everything else that led to its closure had nothing to do with the taxes, because on the very day that the newspaper was closed, the newspaper had paid quite a lot of money towards the backlog of taxes that it was owing. There were several attempts that were made to speak to the tax authority to try and come up with ways in which the outstanding amounts in taxes could be paid. But everybody else was not willing to listen, because ordinarily those are things that you would expect to happen. So you come up with a payment plan on how everything else that was owed could be liquidated. But unfortunately, because of the politics around everything else, they even had to use armed police. So
They
towards the
came to
end of the day,
your offices?
yes,
The
they
police?
did. They came to our head office where the newsroom was housed, and they also went to our printing press and did exactly the same thing. So we just saw police barging in with guns, and they were all dressed like they're going for war and telling us to go out, and we weren't even given any minute to get anything out. And in that moment, it was a situation where you have to make certain decisions, because at the end of the day, we saw that there was a story that needed to be told. So if we
So,
don't,
what were you reporting about the government that made them afraid of you?
it was all around the elections that were to be held a few months before. I recall that that was in June. It was June 16th when we were closed. And the election was in August. So we had been covering a story about how some foreigners from the neighbor in Malawi were getting into Zambia, and they were being registered. So they were getting the national registration cards from Zambia, and they were being given the voters' cards as well. And that's a story that we had planned long before its publication. And by the time we were publishing it, obviously, we expected a backlash, but we were not sure the gravity or how far they could go try and see us out. And of course, the whole idea was to destabilize the entire operations of the newspaper, because by the time we were getting into the election, we were not able to cover the stories as much because we did not have our own printing press. So we could not print as many pages as we used to, so we had to reduce the pagination to probably around 16 from a minimum of 40 every day. Now that meant putting in very little information because you can't put as much. So that in itself was a serious violation of press freedom, which was aimed definitely at the newspaper, and they had to find a loophole, and unfortunately, it had to do with taxes.
All right,
And the bigger,
I wanna bring Guna into the conversation. I'll get back to you in a moment because we're talking about safety for journalists. And we heard in the earlier panel how they were talking about how difficult it is to report from Gaza. People are losing their lives there. More than 100 journalists have been killed in Gaza since the beginning of the current conflict. So how do you define safety in your field? Because life for journalists and activists can be dangerous even if there is no war.
Well, that's the $1 million question, I think. Yeah, I would say what I learned in the last 15 years is
Can you put the mic a bit?
security is not the absence of danger, threat, and risks. For us, it's the adaptation to danger, threat, and risks. So that means if we want to stay safe, if we want to stay secure, and finally, if we want to avoid trauma and want to survive, we need to be very, very adaptive. So to explain it a little bit, what does that mean, being adaptive? So for us, it's 4 things. The first one is awareness. The second is assessment. The third one is leadership. And the last one is incident management or preparation. So what does that mean? Awareness. We have to be aware. We have to use all our senses, our 5 senses, plus intuition. So we have to feel what's going on around us. So that's awareness. Assessment. We need to know what's going on around us. So we have to be orientated. We have, not in the geographical sense, we have to be orientated in the situation, every situation, in the environment we are in. So, for example, the military, they are using a very, very good system to do exactly that, to analyze the environment. And the funny thing in that is the big players of economics, they copied it. Why? Because both want to avoid to face risks. So we need to think about that. That was assessment. Third thing, leadership. When we are talking about leadership, we're talking about decision making. So our decision making must be linked to our mission that we have, and it must be linked to our responsibility that we have, maybe for our team, maybe as a team member, or for ourselves. So, leadership. And the last thing is incident management or preparation. That means we need to have some skills. We need to have skills to deal with specific situations. So these are these questions like what to do if. So what to do if we have to cross an illegal checkpoint? What to do if one of us is very badly hurt? What to do if we need some kind of help from outside?
All right,
So
then
that's adaptation.
Yes,
yeah.
let's get very concrete and very specific because, of course, we also want to share solutions here with our audience. Let's say I was to be sent to Sudan to cover the current crisis. How would you, as the head of DW Travel Security, prepare me for that?
Yeah, that's a good thing. So we have 3 steps. So the first one is what you said, preparation. So what we do is we try to analyze what's going on the ground, and that's our job, and it's your job too. So we have to put all the things on the table and then see what's going on there, and how can we mitigate the risk. That's the goal. We need to mitigate the risk.
But if there's a war going on, what do we mitigate exactly?
Well, we can see where you want to go. What is the story that you want to cover? With whom are you on the ground? So where exactly you want to be? So and then we can sort things out. So and then we try to brief you. So you can do this, you can do that, you can stay at that hotel. You need to organize your transport in that way. So and you need some kind of special equipment. So all that and. A bit before, we will organize training courses for you if needed. So there could be hostile environment training, of course, first aid training, of course. and maybe some...
Self-defense, something like that?
Sorry?
Self-defense?
Well, no. We say it's not a really good idea. You need to practice self-defense for years and years and years to be very, very on a very high level to do that. And in this situation, you are not able to practice it in a good way. So we say no. No.
So you'd rather give me the steps of, as you said, what to do if you are, for example, kidnapped, if you are arrested at a checkpoint, things like that. You'll give me tips.
This is one part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is to avoid being arrested, avoid being kidnapped. So there are steps before. Yeah.
All right, I understand. Sarina, I want to bring you back into the conversation because we now want to focus on Iran and to look at what happened in 2022. We already talked about the Women Life Freedom mass protests across the country after the death of Gina Mahsa Amini. Now, many journalists were arrested, about 100 after the protests and during the protests. So where do Iranian journalists and activists turn to for safety, for support? Are there any networks?
Well, there is a community based in Tehran that by name, they are the supporters of journalists. First of all, I have to say I am not a journalist, and in front of all these great journalists, I want to say that to be in a safe spot first. But the information that I give about journalism in Iran, it's all coming from the journalists in Iran because I do work with them. So there is a community based in Tehran that sometimes they give inside workshops and stuff like that. The only help that they could do is when you have problem with your boss working in a newspaper or something like that, they just come the first 2 steps with you, but when you need a lawyer, they don't protect you. When you are especially political journalist, not at all. And to be honest, there is no stability, no safety, and no insurance for journalism in Iran. I can say that very clearly.
Is that the reason why we have so many Iranian journalists in exile?
Of course, because also in Iran there is no academic process of learning journalism.
So you can't get a journalism degree?
No, they have it, but they don't let... So the thing is, you can be a journalist without having the academic process. And we don't have an academic process. There is, and this is a lot of times one of the problems. So that's why social media and people will also become the main source of the news, because a lot of journalists are not academically trained to be journalists or not writing in a right way about what's happening inside. So that's why we need a lot of support from the journalists outside, that they get into the news, the source of the what's happening inside, and they write about it. But what I can say is, like, in Iran, if you want to, on your own money, on your own investment, you want to go do a workshop outside. For example, 6-7 years ago, Deutsche Welle had a kind of workshop how to cover news about kids and stuff like that. And this community based in Tehran tried to convince the government that 20 journalists come out and learn properly the process. They were doing all the process before they leave. The governmental members, those who are working in the information organization, IRGC, they were give them a call and they say, we think for safety reason, we should not let you get out. And that's the only explanation. It sounds simple, but it means if you get out, you will get arrested in the airport. It means this is already a crime. If you just participate in a workshop as a journalist on your own money and come back to the country, this is an open case in the court for you, because you are a spy, because you are doing something with another country. So there is really no such rules or standards for journalists to, and if they are doing it, it's all for the passion and the searching for truth, helping people, because even they don't have a good income. And
So it's also a huge sacrifice on their part. Joan, you are no stranger to intimidation, to being arrested. After working for The Post, you moved on to a new newspaper. It is called The Mast. Tell me about what tactics you use to keep yourself and your publication safe.
Yeah, that was quite some period. I recall very well that we had to be extra cautious. But what you should also know is that we were in a period where we were decapacitated, in short. We did not have any proper financing because all the accounts for the newspaper were frozen by the tax authority. So we had to start from scratch, and I was in the lead in ensuring that the new outfit, which was called the MAST, was able to operate, and we had to come up with ways in which we could, ensure safety, which was quite a priority. On a daily basis, we had intelligence staff who were shadowing each of my team members, and I was one of the key targets because obviously they needed to know what we were up to.
So would you notice people following you around the way Sarina said it was happening in Iran?
At times, yes. So mostly vehicles. So you had to find a way to move around because there would be a vehicle that would be following you wherever you're going. And during that period, there were moments when I would wake from my house for 2 weeks and I'm not stepping out because of the fears of having someone wanting to know what you're up to, where you're getting to. And I would utilize late times, maybe around midnight, for me to check where the next publication will be printed. Because at the end of the day, I had to know every little detail, so I could not leave that to anybody else because a lot of them were scared. So it was a situation where if it's not the police, it's the intelligence staff that will be following you. And everybody else was not ready to take some of those risks because they wouldn't want to be beaten or they wouldn't want any of their family members coming into the picture. So I took that up and ensured that all the team members are safe and they were separated. We couldn't be in one place because if they come to that place, then it means everybody else is gone. So you will not have a publication, you will not have the reporters to do the stories, you will not have the production staff to lay the pages out. So they were split and operating in different places and unknown places. And we were never in one place for more than a week. So the maximum would be a week. Then we move and go to another place, and that went on for months.
And you would still print a paper version of the newspaper?
We would still print a paper version,
yeah.
And we were always relying on those that were ready and brave enough to help us out. Some who were afraid would outrightly tell us, even if there's money to pay them, because we didn't have our own printers, so we say, we're ready to pay you, and they'll say, no, you can keep your money, all I want is to secure my printing press, I cannot risk this. Then the few brave ones will say, okay, fine, but they will make sure that they double the cost. Because for them, it was an opportunity to make the money. And for us, we were not looking at the cost of the printing and just how much was going in with very little coming out. What we were looking at is playing the role that every journalist should play, and that is to disseminate information. And we were trying to make sure that we do not give up our rights and ensuring that we safeguard the press freedom that we value so much, and which is at the center of every democracy. And for a country like Zambia, we said, well, we have to pass on the message here. We're saying Zambia is a democracy, but this is going on. So we will show everybody that even with everything else that is going on, for the sake of our democracy, we'll make sure that this continues to survive. And of course, there are so many things that came in the picture. With a new outfit, at some point, they managed to get information from one of the people, unfortunately, that we thought we could trust, but they blew up the cover and they came in, and unfortunately it was at a venue where we were doing the production work. And I was with the team, so myself with 3 other members, unfortunately, were, I would say, held hostage. So the police were there with guns and they told us to stop doing what we were doing. They were making pages on the computers that we would always move with. So whenever you break camp from where you are, you move with them. So because we were told we couldn't do anything, work still had to go on. But like I said, there's always a way that you can plan and assess, and knowing that there's always trouble coming the next day. There was some computer somewhere which I had planted, and there was always someone on standby who was able to make the pages. So I told the guys to stop, just turn off the computers, and I used my phone to edit everything else that needed to be edited and passed on to the other gentleman who was in an unknown place with a computer that was able to make the pages, and relying on the reporters who were placed in different locations to collect the stories and package them and send them to me via WhatsApp. So the editing process was all done via WhatsApp and sent to the person that was making the pages. Now, in the minds of the police and the people that were sending them, they were very sure they were not going to see any edition the next day because they had taken charge of a place where we were doing the work, and they were extremely happy, and they sent word to say, we have found them, and we know now where everything else has been going on. So come the next day, they were shocked that there was a paper on the street. So everything else was produced on the phone. I edited the papers, I did an editorial comment, I did practically everything just on the phone. And they were sort of defeated, and that's how we saw that a few of the police officers who were there were even withdrawn. Because the question was, if you guys are there and they were able to do this, then why are you there? It serves no purpose.
failed.
So it means we haven't really managed to get hold of where everything else is done.
Yeah, all right. So that is, you need to be very resourceful and to plan ahead and always expect the unexpected. So go ahead and tell me about safety, not only for yourself, but also for your devices. And earlier you talked about it's better to think about how to not get arrested and not think about how am I going to get out of the situation of being detained.
Yeah,
Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, that's right. The arrest itself is it's the last part of a long chain. So we see signs, we have informations, we have incidents. So, and we have to analyze that, we have to assess that again. So we are in this thing, as I said, awareness assessment. I have to make decisions, as you said. It's a perfect example for adaptation. So, yeah, and you have to read all the signs, and then you have to prepare yourself, and that could be to secure your equipment, your laptops and your phones. Use several SIM cards and phones. Maybe blur your lines. Maybe work a little bit undercover. Maybe search for a safe house or things like that. So.
That is assuming that these things exist where you are, right?
Sorry, again?
That is assuming that when you talk about like search for a safe house, what would that be exactly? I'm just asking as if you're new to a country and you've been sent there. Is that something that is being organized?
It depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on the environment you're working in. But we saw that. We saw that in Afghanistan a few years ago. So we were forced to find a safe place for a colleague of us. So, and it was very, very hard to find one. It is possible, and sometimes it helps, sometimes not.
Yeah.
To be honest, if your own institutions, if your own government wants to arrest you, this is the biggest enemy that you can have. So that's the hell on earth.
So, yes, Joan, you want to say something?
Yeah, just to make an addition, I know we've talked about all these things that need to be done, the planning, the assessment, and probably making certain decisions and taking certain actions. But what I can say now is I see a lot of media organizations struggling in that area. Some of them not because they don't want to do that, or some of them not because they are not aware of the risks that come with the practice of journalism and they have to take action, but because some of them may not have the resources one would need to put in place proper safety measures or safety nets for their journalists. And that has been one of the biggest problems, and that's a reason why the organization that I represent has taken that up as one of the...
You mean the Zambia Free Press
Zambia Free Press Initiative. Yeah, it's one of the areas that we've been looking at to ensure that some of those media organizations that are struggling are given some support. So we started from...
Who is the one responsible for giving that support if a media organization says that we do not have the funding to have somebody like Gunnar who will be offering maybe trainings or who will be in charge of security?
Yeah, absolutely. So we partner with other organizations, and one of the organizations that we have done some safety training with is One IFRA. They've done some on-location training in safety, And right now we are actually trying to find ways in which we can push ahead and have as much of such activities as possible, because we'll be having elections in the next 2 years. Not that we've had the most volatile of situations, but of course looking at the other aspects that come into play, for instance, the arrests of journalists, that's something that has never stopped. Some political cadres storming radio stations, what can they do to ensure that some of those things do not happen? Or if it happens, how can they ensure that they are safe enough not to jeopardize their operations or not to have any of the journalists attacked while all those things are happening? So there are all those things that are taking place, and we can find some solutions by, putting everybody together and providing whatever little support can be provided to them. And those that may need some financial support, obviously, there are other institutions that can come in. And there's also the legal aspect, where some of them do find themselves arrested or maybe summoned by police who intimidate them. Other organizations that we have memoranda of understanding with provide some legal
Can you name a
assistance.
few names? You also work for the Committee to Protect Journalists.
Oh, well, I do, but I cannot speak on behalf of
Yes,
Committee to
but
Protect
would that also
Journalists,
be a
but-
place to go to?
Well, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So they can approach the CPJ, and I know a few journalists in Zambia that have gotten support from CPJ, and a few others in other countries, Malawi, Lesotho, and mention it. So there are those organizations, but what I'm looking at is what can Zambian organizations, being in Zambia and understanding the landscape, the political landscape, for instance, and the legal landscape itself, how can they be of much more help to the journalists that are there? And I think that will make a lot of sense, and those are some of the things.
So local organizations also need to step in. Sarina, as you said, the government of Iran is very hostile towards activists, towards journalists, and you mentioned that there are networks, of course, abroad. So tell me about the kind of support you would wish from, for example, foreign governments, but also from other networks and associations abroad. Very briefly, if you can.
I think my wish is it is very important. I have to say, I wished everyone was here and I could talk to all the journalists just like this and tell them how important it is to cover, we need international journalists, not just Iranian ones, because we have lots of limitations, borders, we have a lot of things that would stop you to work, but still there are activists who are doing the job of journalists because we are in a lack of having enough journalists. So international journalism are very important for us. It's important to care that when the world having wars happening, I think the other speaker also mentioned, but what about us? It's 46 years. Women cannot breathe. It's 46 years. We be killed with no rule. You are on the street, you were just walking, and next day you can be arrested, and after a month you are executed. And this is not normal, it's not okay. I think it's important to, it's my personal question, if I have a chance to talk to anyone directly from the journalists, what is the fact that you use and keep balance between covering the news? Because, for example, it's been years that Kurdistan is getting bombed from different parts of the countries, from Syria, from Iran, from, I don't know, and nobody is talking about it. It's also a genocide that it's happening for years, for 50 years. But no one is talking about it because we are also in the lack of having enough journalists there to cover. I have a friend who covered the whole thing that happened for ISIS. Now he lives in Spain, but he decided to stay. It was very important. He was living in Amsterdam. He was Kurdish. He came back when the war happened. He covered for 4 years, and he's the only one who actually recorded what's happening in Mosul, Basra. Mosul, Basra was not the Kurdish part, but he was feeling responsible. He came, he covered, he did it, and now he lives in Spain. He's one of the best in the world with doing photojournalism. But what?
So you're talking about that we need to also have balance, especially in the international media coverage. We're running out of time, Sarina. Thank you very much for your powerful words. I want to give the last word to Guna because we haven't talked about mental health as well. That is also an issue, of course, when it comes to safety and to journalists' well-being. Is that something that you and your department offer as well, or where can journalists go for that?
No, we are not doing that. It's not part of our job of the travel security team, but we do have a structure structure in Deutsche Welle. We do have a healthcare team, so and they are responsible for that, and they do have two specialists. Psychologists. So one is in Berlin, one is based in Bonn, and as a staff member of DW, you can get in contact with them whenever you want. So if you are mentally exhausted or whatever, you can go to that.
So that is something that people should also ask about in their organizations if they have come back from covering war, from covering conflict, if they see any signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, to make sure that they talk to an expert, right?
Sure, yeah, it's a part of duty of care. Yeah, okay, we have to do that.
Sarina, it looks like you want to say something. I'm going to allow one sentence because we've really run out of time
Not
already.
one sentence, but like...
2 sentences.
I just want to say, I think the solution is to have a continuous work, and because it might take years, but it's important to not forget different parts of the world that are struggling. We really and truly, we have a war inside. It's happening. They killed 1,600 people 4 or 5 years ago in one day in Tehran. In one day, they killed 1,600 people. If this is not a war, then what it is? So please keep on international work on different parts of the world as a continuous work, not just for a month, talk about women and feminism, not just for 2 months, get excited of, oh, the first women revolution is happening in the world, and then leave it behind. Because I will, until I breathe, I will do all my artistic work just based on the struggles that women are going through. Before I was caring about artistic value, now I care about what am I going to send to the people who are watching me for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour. So I just wish this responsibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. And I am hearing from the control booth that we unfortunately do not have time for questions and answers. But my 3 panelists are still around, so catch them during the break. They will be very happy to chat with you and to answer all of your questions. I see you, sir, but we have to leave it here to give space for the next panel. Thank you very much for your attention. I will allow you now to go back to your seats. Thank you very much, Sarina, Joan, and Gunnar.